It was one of those unexpected gifts life throws at you. I got out of work early. No last-minute emails, no late meetings. Just sunshine, a free afternoon, and a sudden thought. What if I made this day special? Things between Lucas and me had been tense lately, distant, like we were sharing space, not a life. So I thought, maybe this was the universe giving me a moment to reach out. Instead of heading straight home, I took a detour. The bakery on 7th, the one we used to love on Sundays. I hadn't been there in months. The second I stepped inside, I was wrapped in that warm, buttery air. I smiled. I picked up his favorite pastries, the flaky cheese rolls, the cinnamon twists he always stole from my plate. I even grabbed that crusty country bread we used to tear apart over coffee. The whole drive home, I imagined his face when he saw me walk in with that box. Maybe we'd laugh, sit on the porch, just be together for a while. I didn't even text. I wanted it to be a real surprise. And as I quietly opened the front door, holding that little white box like it was a peace offering, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The house was strangely quiet. Not the usual hum of the TV or music from the kitchen. Just silence. I thought maybe Lucas had gone out for a walk, but his shoes were still by the door. I tiptoed in, still smiling, still clutching that box of pastries like it was a ribbon-tied memory. I headed toward the living room, imagining his surprised face, maybe even a little laugh when he realized I came home early just for him. But then I saw them. There, on our couch, Lucas and another woman, half-dressed, his hands on her, their mouths too close. Time didn't slow down like in the movies. It sped up. My heart slammed against my ribs and everything went sharp. The box slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud, pastries scattering like the moment had exploded right there on the rug. They froze. She scrambled, grabbed her things in a panic, barely meeting my eyes before rushing out. Lucas turned to me, face pale, lips parted, caught between a lie and an apology he hadn't chosen yet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, with all that silence between us. And in that silence, something inside me snapped into place, painfully, clearly. It's strange, the things you notice in moments like that. The way the curtain moved slightly from the breeze, the half-empty glass of orange juice on the coffee table, the smell of her perfume, too sweet, too bold, hanging in the room like an insult, and Lucas, still buttoning his shirt, like modesty could fix any of it. He opened his mouth, probably to spin some tired excuse, but I beat him to it. I left work early, I said, barely recognizing the steadiness in my own voice. I wanted to surprise you. His eyes widened. He stammered. Something pathetic. I didn't wait for the rest. Whatever came next wasn't for me. I stepped back, not in defeat, but in decision. There was no crying, no begging, only a new kind of stillness. Rage didn't roar through me. It settled, cold, controlled, purposeful. And in that clarity, I knew one thing for sure. This wouldn't end with me shattered on the floor next to those pastries. I don't remember walking from the living room to the hallway. My body moved, but my mind stayed frozen on the image of them. I heard Lucas behind me, stumbling with words, his voice catching up to my silence. And then, like a bad play, he called out, "Amanda, wait, this isn't what it looks like." That sentence, that tired, pitiful sentence. I stopped, but not for him, for myself. I turned around slowly, my hands still trembling, my heart thudding like a warning drum. "Really?" I asked, steady and sharp. "Then tell me exactly what I'm looking at." His face twisted, guilt and panic fighting for space. He tried reaching for me. I didn't move. I just wanted to hear what kind of fantasy he was going to invent. And then he said it, the thing that would burn itself into my memory more than the scene on the couch. "You're never home," he snapped. "You're always at work. I need love too, Amanda." There it was, the shift, from caught to victim, from guilty to wounded. Like somehow I had pushed him into another woman's arms by having ambition, by being tired, by not reading his mind every second of the day. I stared at him, baffled at how quickly he rewrote the story, like I hadn't just walked in on betrayal, like he was the one who'd been hurt. He paced the room now, full of sudden energy, spewing nonsense. I've been lonely. You don't see me anymore. We barely talk. Every word, a shovel digging his own grave. I let him talk, not because I cared, but because watching him scramble was oddly clarifying. Then I spoke, my voice lower than before, but sharp enough to cut through his delusion. So you cheat? I asked. In our home? With a stranger? His face twitched. He opened his mouth, probably to defend the undefendable. I didn't let him. You've been distant, cold, he said, like a child trying to justify breaking a window because he was bored. I took a step toward him. I wanted him to hear this up close. I expected a man, I said, not a coward who blames his wife for his betrayal. That one hit him. He recoiled like I'd slapped him, but I hadn't even raised my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything he could say. He tried again, softer this time, almost pitiful. Amanda, please. Can we just talk? But the damage was done. His words were like ashes in the mouth of a fire he lit himself. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, really looked, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. A man too weak to own his choices, too small to face what he destroyed. I walked past him without a word. No drama, no door slam. Just the quiet sound of my keys in my bag and the front door clicking behind me. Rage pulsed under my skin, but it wasn't the wild kind. It was focused, clean. I didn't fall apart. I didn't collapse onto a friend's couch and sob. I kept walking until I knew I couldn't hear his voice anymore. That night, in a quiet guest room that smelled like lavender and fresh sheets, I lay awake, not heartbroken, but alert. Every nerve buzzing with thought. Not about what I lost, but about what I was going to do next. Because if he thought that was the end of it, he had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I was already 10 steps ahead. While he probably thought I was curled up somewhere, broken and defeated, I was making calls. Quiet ones. Strategic. I started with the obvious, a lawyer. Not the kind who just files papers. I wanted someone sharp, someone who knew how to make things hurt legally, the kind who smiled while tightening the screws. Then I began collecting. Not just screenshots of messages, though there were plenty. I dug deeper. Credit card statements, emails, hotel receipts. I even remembered the little camera tucked behind the bookshelf, the one we installed years ago after a break-in and never bothered to remove. I didn't know what it had captured yet, but I was going to find out. While the evidence piled up, I opened a separate bank account, transferred just enough to make a point and to protect myself. Every action I took was deliberate, methodical. There was no more shaking, no more second-guessing. I wasn't playing the victim. I was preparing for a performance, one where the curtains would rise and Lucas would never forget the show. By the time I returned home, the air inside felt heavier, but not because of guilt. I had rehearsed every breath, every glance. I opened the door like nothing had happened, set my purse down, kicked off my shoes, smiled faintly when I saw him. Lucas looked surprised, maybe even a little relieved. "You're back," he said, trying to read my expression. I gave him nothing. "I figured we should talk," I said, calm, controlled, the same tone I'd used to ask a neighbor for sugar. He nodded too quickly, like a man who thinks the bullet missed him. He didn't know I had already fired. He just hadn't heard the shot yet. I offered to make tea. He sat down, his guard lowered. That was his mistake. He assumed I was here to fix things. That maybe I had cried it all out and come to some fragile, forgiving conclusion. But I wasn't back to beg or explain. I was here for the setup, a final performance. And the best part? He was playing his role perfectly, clueless, arrogant, and completely unaware that every second was part of his countdown. That night, he fell asleep next to me like nothing had changed. I lay there, still as stone, staring at the ceiling while his breath slowed into soft, careless rhythm. He had no idea that every minute I stayed was part of his undoing. I had already mapped out the next few days, appointments, bank protections, the timing of the legal drop. All I had to do now was wait. Let him believe I'd forgiven. Let him get comfortable. I even laughed at one of his stories over breakfast the next morning. Not because it was funny, but because it made him believe I was still his. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. I didn't flinch. I let him. Because power is quiet. And in that silence, I had never felt more in control. When I caught my reflection in the mirror later that day, I barely recognized her. This version of me didn't shrink. She planned. She watched. She waited. And she was about to deliver a lesson Lucas would never forget. The morning it all unfolded was almost cinematic. I woke up early, made the bed, opened the windows, and let the light flood in. Lucas was still asleep, snoring softly, unaware that this was the last morning he'd ever wake up in this house. I moved through the kitchen with quiet precision. Fresh coffee brewing, eggs sizzling, bread warming in the oven. I made his favorite breakfast, just like I used to. He came down in his usual daze, rubbing his eyes, hair a mess. "Smells amazing," he said, smiling like the man I once knew. I smiled back, calm, gentle, cruel. He sat at the table, sipping coffee, relaxing into the illusion. I served the food, poured his drink, kissed the top of his head. And then, I placed a folder beside his plate. Thick, brown, heavy. At first, he didn't notice. Then he glanced at it, paused, looked at me. I said nothing, just sipped my tea. When he finally opened it, the air shifted. Inside, printed messages, financial statements, timestamps, photos, legal papers, an eviction notice. He blinked, processing it like a man who just realized the house is on fire but hasn't smelled the smoke until now. "Amanda, what is this?" he asked, voice unsteady, already knowing the answer. I didn't respond right away. I let him feel the weight of every page, every lie documented, every betrayal printed and stapled. Then I looked up and said it clearly, like I was reading the weather. "It's your moving plan. You'll need to be out by Friday." He stared at me, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. "You're kicking me out? This is my home too." I set my cup down gently. "No, Lucas, it's my name on the deed. You brought filth into my house. Now take it with you." I saw the panic flash across his face, then anger, then confusion. He didn't know which emotion to pick, so he cycled through all of them. He started with pleading, how we could talk, how we could fix this. When that didn't work, he moved to threats. Said I was being cold, unreasonable. I didn't flinch, I didn't shout, I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I simply picked up my phone, dialed my lawyer, and in front of him confirmed that he'd been served, and that the locks would be changed the moment he stepped out. He stood there like he was expecting me to crumble. Like maybe this was some bluff I'd walk back. But I didn't. I cleared the table, picked up his empty plate, tossed the crumbs into the trash. I didn't even look at him when I said, "You have 3 days. After that, I won't be responsible for where your things end up." He tried to argue again, but the edge in my voice stopped him cold. He packed in silence that afternoon, rage simmering under every movement. I stayed upstairs, windows open, music playing softly. It wasn't joy I felt, it was release. Like taking off a coat you've worn too long, heavy, suffocating. And finally, your skin breathes again. I didn't need revenge. I needed space, peace, and I was claiming it back, inch by inch. The last thing I heard before the door shut behind him was the rustle of his duffel bag and the jingle of his keys left on the counter. No goodbyes, no parting words, just the sound of a man being erased from a life he thought he controlled. The silence left behind wasn't empty. It was full. Full of possibility, full of space I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The first thing I did was strip the bedroom bare. I took down the curtains we picked out together, Replaced the bedspread, repainted the walls. The pale yellow color felt like sunlight, like waking up inside a deep breath. Every corner of the house got touched by my hands, my choices, my taste. I rearranged the furniture, moved the armchair by the window, bought new plants. Ones I'd never had before, just because he didn't like them. I found myself humming while vacuuming, playing old records while scrubbing the kitchen tiles. It was healing disguised as chores, like reclaiming each tile, each drawer, each echo of laughter that used to belong to both of us. And Lucas? He tried. Of course he did. Calls, texts, emails. I didn't block him. That would have given him too much power. I just didn't respond. Let him live in the silence he once forced on me. He sent flowers once, white lilies of all things. I left them on the porch until they wilted in the heat. I started sleeping better, deeper. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because the weight that used to sit on my chest every night was gone. I realized how often I had made myself smaller to keep him comfortable, how I tiptoed around his moods, edited my joy, quieted my disappointments. Now, the silence was mine. The space was mine. I was learning to stretch again, into myself. One afternoon, I passed the little cafe where it all began, where I bought the pastries that never got eaten. I almost kept walking, but something made me stop. This time, I walked in for me. I didn't order anything for anyone else, just a slice of cake, a good coffee, and a table in the sun. I sat by the window, watching people pass, savoring the lightness in my chest. The waiter came over with a smile and set down the plate. "On the house," he said. "You look like someone who just got her peace back." I chuckled, not bitter, not broken, just honest. I picked up the fork and took a bite. It was soft, rich, warm, and in that moment I knew something deep in my bones. Peace has a flavor. And this was the sweetest bite yet. I didn't need closure, not from him, not from anyone. What I needed, and finally claimed, was clarity. That I had always been enough, that love should never come with humiliation, that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest way to reclaim your voice. I walked out of that cafe with no grand plan, no drama. Just a full stomach, a clear mind, and a quiet kind of victory. Back home, the air felt different, like the house had exhaled. I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle, and sat alone in the living room. But it wasn't loneliness. It was presence. My presence. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a message, not an apology, not a change of heart. Just the soft, steady rhythm of my own peace. And as I sat there, watching the flame flicker and dance, one thought settled over me like a blanket. Turns out, kicking him out was the sweetest surprise of all.